Workers are working from home. What happens to workplace morale when everybody is working remote? We'll be talking to a company that is leading the way next on the Jeff Crilley Show.
Many are predicting that the worst is yet to come, which is unfortunate, said one person here. Until now, they've enjoyed the reputation of being the nation's icebox.
Watched a burglar in his home this morning by webcam.
As a journalist of over 25 years, stories are what make my world turn.
Reporting live from the Dallas newsroom tonight, Jeff Crilley, Fox 4 News.
But in 2008, I took the jump from my familiar life and started a PR firm from my home.
We're talking about anyone with a camcorder like the one I'm using becomes a television network.
We started slowly growing the company, and we now have over 100 clients, and we've branched into the world of live digital broadcasting. I now own 8 different TV studios and have a huge team, and the stories that I now get to share are sometimes the most important of my life. Life has a funny way of coming around full circle. This is the Jeff Crilley Show.
Well, I remember at the height of the pandemic back in, I want to say March, we had our offices closed for 6 weeks. And as an owner of a small company, I was kind of worried because I like to pride myself that we have a great workplace morale. But what happens when everybody is on a Zoom call? How does that work? To navigate that with us, Tony Bridwell, he's with Ryan. You are the Chief People Officer. I love that title.
Thank you. It's different than Chief HR. I mean, most people call it CHRO, Chief HR Officer, but we're kind of in the people business, so we changed it to Chief People Officer.
And I love that. So we're going to talk more about Brent Ryan and the beginnings of the company, but you guys always make the list of the best places to work. So as a Chief People Officer, when you guys got hit by the pandemic, are you concerned about, can we keep this culture together when everybody's working from home?
Absolutely, Jeff. I mean, it really is the number one issue because culture delivers results. And so how do you keep that together? We were very, very fortunate in the fact that we had put in place 11 years ago a program inside the organization called My Ryan. And it's workplace flexibility before it was cool. And so on any given day leading up to the pandemic, we had a third of our organization that would be remote anyway. So we knew it worked. The only thing that we were really concerned about was, would we break the internet if we sent everybody home at once? We tested it a couple of weeks in advance, and on March 13th, we sent everybody home, and we didn't miss a lick. And so because our people had that muscle already built on what it looked like to be remote or be disconnected. I mean, we have 75 offices in 8 countries, and so it's rare that a team has everybody sitting right next to them anyway. So for us, it's about how do we keep that going, and we found a cadence. And we have enhanced certain things along the way, especially around well-being, which is very critical for all our people. We've enhanced some of that as we've gone, but it's worked very well. We've grown year over year, haven't really missed a beat, and it's all because of our amazing people.
Wow. And when I say you guys are leading the way, that's not an exaggeration. You guys have been featured in dozens and dozens of magazine articles. What are some of the accolades you've received?
Great places to work year after year. Earlier in 2020, and I said this to you earlier, 2020 is kind of a blur. I said, last year, August of last year, Business Insider, the magazine Business Insider, released their top 25 list of the top 25 CEOs to lead through the pandemic, and our founder CEO, Brent Ryan, was number 2 on the list. And they based that off of Glassdoor reviews and Glassdoor rating. And at the time, Brent had a CEO rating of 96, which is unheard of. Today, his rating is at 98.
That is amazing.
Yeah.
One of the accolades you've received is from the Dallas Business Journal. We're going to put that up on the screen. Best Places to Work Award, and that's a very prestigious award, obviously. But let's talk more about Brent Ryan, because you were telling me before we went on that in the early days, he wasn't as committed to workplace culture as he is today.
Yeah, Jeff, this is an interesting story. This year, 2021, we celebrate our 30th anniversary. So July of this year, we celebrate our 30th anniversary. So last year, I started working on a series called 30 and 30, right? So 30 stories over 30 years. And really what you can do is you can look at the Ryan story, kind of like a play. You go to the theater and there's 3 acts. Mm-hmm. Our first act, first 10 years, people will tell you, it was hard. It was a sweatshop. It really was before the advent of everybody having a laptop, so you had to be in the office, and it was 6.5 days, 18 hours a day. It was a grind, and the business was just exploding. And then in that middle 10, we started having this aha moment because our people that we were hiring right out of college were starting to grow up, starting to get married, and starting to have families, and we realized that there is a balance issue, and we don't call it work-life balance. That's really a myth. We call it work-life success, because if you think of balance, you think equal parts, but for us, it's how do we create success in work and in life? And so that's when we created this idea of My Rhine, the flexible workplace. Let me tell you, that has changed everything. Our engagement is going through the roof, and this last 10 years has really been about fine-tuning the culture. And I've had the opportunity to come in that last season to really focus on the culture, focus on the well-being of our people. And our most recent engagement survey from last year during the pandemic was in the high 90s, which is absolutely unheard of.
It really is. You are a very accomplished and dynamic public speaker. I know that you've been doing a lot of Zoom talks this past year, but we've got a clip that we want to share with you right now. It's a beautiful clip of him speaking.
The minute you discount somebody, what they're saying as just being quote unquote below the line, you're missing a chunk of your culture, because that is a belief. If you're having to lift a team member or team members up for the same thing multiple times, you have a cultural issue. Here's what we know for sure, that when we operate above the line, living these best practices to their fullest, every single day, we create greater accountability for our key results, and we deliver results. When we don't demonstrate these best practices on a regular basis, we do not get a desired result. You want to know what excellence is? Creating accountability by living the best practices to their fullest each day. That's excellence.
Wow. Well, let's talk a little bit about your speaking career, because you told me before the show that you did something like 50 Zoom speeches. Is it different when you can't see the audience?
100%. Oh my gosh. Yes, that, speakers tend to feed off that audience, and this as well as anybody. You tend to feed off the energy of that audience, and so you have to find that energy from other people, especially if you're on one of these calls and everybody's camera's turned off and you can't see. I have the honor and privilege of lecturing at college classes up at UNT, and so I did that 3 times, and the teachers actually require the students have their cameras on. Jeff, it was hilarious. And so, in order to get credit for the class, you have to have your camera on, you have to log in the chat to say that you're there. And so I'm looking at this screen and I'm thinking, this is gonna be awesome. I'm gonna get all this energy off these students and everything. I took a snapshot of it. 2 people down on the corner, and I won't mention his name, he is in bed, horizontal, sound asleep, Jeff. It was absolutely hilarious. And I'm thinking, okay, that pretty much summed up my talk right there, right? And it was so fun. But yeah, it's different to talk just to the camera as a speaker. Yeah.
You've also written a best-selling book. It's called Saturday Morning Tea, and it's something of a parable. Talk about that.
Yeah. So we learn through stories.
Sure.
Right, and I'm not bagging on other books because I own every single one of them, right? But 7 of these and 3 of those and 10 of this, and they're all wonderful. I own every single one of them. But what I've noticed is sometimes we can become enablers of just giving people the answers. And so the more challenging component is if you tell a story through a story and you start digging out, you start relating to characters, you start digging this out, going, wait a minute, I just had an experience just exactly like that. We tend to engage different parts of our mind, and learning kicks in a little bit quicker. And so all of my books have been parables that have bigger meanings kind of woven in. This particular book was very deliberate. It's a short book. It's an hour and a half. You can get in and get out. And it's a 2-character book, and it's about the power of story to change anything and everything, quite frankly. And we live our life through stories. Our brains are designed to live our life through stories. We interpret what's happening through story. We tell stories every single day. So that was the intent. And we use that concept to teach our people about culture inside our place.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the importance of great culture, because it seems like every generation it becomes more and more important. If I go back to my grandfather's day, you went to work at a Ford or GM, and you punched the clock, and life is not a bowl of cherries, son, and suck it up, and that doesn't play today, does it?
It's different, and generation to generation things change. And what we say about culture is this: every organization has one, whether you like it or not, and your culture is perfectly aligned to get the results that you're getting. So if you need something different, you need to look inside the culture. And culture, really simple. There's a lot of definitions and they're all great, but the very simple definition on culture is the way people think, feel, and act. That's culture, the way people think, feel, and act. And we say it all begins with the story. And we tell 3 stories all day long. And if you understand these 3 stories and make sure they're aligned, you can actually lead the culture. But if you tell these 3 stories in a misaligned way, it creates confusion for people. And so they're going to default to their own biases or beliefs.
Right.
And that creates confusion.
And if the boss is not focused on it, it's to his or her detriment, because you end up losing great people, and now you're spending all your time recruiting and training. So talk a little bit about that.
So what happens, Jeff, is that when there's a lack of influence at a leadership level, the space is always filled with process, right? So when a leader doesn't have influence, they will fill that space with a process in order to push or muscle. We call it muscling a result. And so when you can't lead the culture, you end up reverting back to, and some people have heard it referred to as command and control. And we refer back to, I'm just going to tell you what to do, when to do, how to do. And that'll work in a short period of time. During a crisis, for a short period of time, it's very effective. Over long periods of time, you start to lose people, just like you said, and people start to wear out. Engagement starts to drop. You have retention problems, and it's just crazy. So when you understand how culture works, and we say it starts with story. Story forms. Story is really the language of experiences, right? Story informs our beliefs. Our beliefs drive what we do, and that produces an outcome, which tells a story. And everything starts with story. So we focus on 3 stories. When you show up, speak up, and sync up. Those are the 3 stories that we tell all day long. The nonverbal story, the verbal story, and then the system, process, tradition story. That's the sync up. We sync up with a system, a technology, a process. We tell those 3 stories all day long. When those stories are not aligned, you get confusion. But when you align those 3 stories, your culture moves.
And you got to mean it. In the little time that we have left, I mean, sometimes people have a slogan they put on a wall, but everybody looks at it and says, nope, that's not our reality. Right. Speak to that.
Well, so when we went back and looked and captured, why is Brent as successful as he is in this season of life of 98% Glassdoor rating, great place to work, leading this organization? We really identified 3 traits in his storytelling. So when he shows up, when he speaks up, and even when he puts systems and processes in place, there's 3 themes that is constantly present. He's sincere, he's clear, and he's compassionate. And those 3 stories are hypercritical. We even incorporate them. I mean, when I look at my day and I look at my calendar, Jeff, I look at every meeting I have and I ask myself, how can I show up, speak up, and even sync up, when I engage in a sincere, clear, and compassionate manner. Sincere, being authentic, clear, 2 or 3 things. Compassionate, having that empathy and that level of generosity toward other people. Hands down, tell those 3 stories all day long.
Wow.
You're going to win.
Congratulations. You've been a great inspiration, and I can see why Ryan is so successful. We're going to put the website up so everybody can get in touch. Ryan.com is the website, and of course, get Tony's book and plug in and figure out a way to get him to speak at your next Zoom meeting. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Appreciate it. Thanks, Jeff.
You bet. And that's it. We'll see you next time.